They always say trust is the foundation of any marriage, Beau. I used to believe that too. Until the night my husband came home smelling like betrayal and told me it was just dinner. My name is Madison, and I used to be the kind of woman who gave the benefit of the doubt. Not out of ignorance, but because I believed in the man I married. For 8 years, we built everything together, brick by brick, dollar by dollar. We didn't come from wealth, we came from grit. We dreamed of owning a restaurant together one day, something warm, intimate, tucked into a quiet street with string lights and good jazz. A place people would fall in love in. The kind of place we always said we'd retire into, just the two of us, cooking and laughing with a glass of red in hand. We had a savings account, a shared dream, and I thought a shared loyalty. But then he started working late. At first, it was once or twice a week. Then it became I've got a meeting or client dinner. Can't miss it. I didn't question it. I knew how hard we were both hustling. Or at least, I thought we were both hustling. But that Thursday night, something shifted. He came home at 11:47 p.m. I was curled up on the couch, half asleep, waiting. He walked in, loosened his tie, and dropped his keys like nothing had happened. And that's when I smelled it. Not smoke, not alcohol. Perfume. Something floral, too sweet, too deliberate. That perfume didn't belong to me, and it sure as hell didn't belong in our house. "Hey," I asked softly, keeping my voice even. "Where were you?" He smiled. That same tired smile he always used when he wanted me to stop talking. "Dinner, with the Martinelli clients. You know, that investor couple I told you about." I nodded. Didn't press, didn't cry, but something inside me cracked. The next morning, I checked our bank account, not because I didn't trust him, but because I couldn't ignore the lump in my throat that had hardened overnight. He'd withdrawn $30,000 from our joint savings. No note, no message, just gone. It wasn't a wire. It wasn't rent. It was a card swipe at a place called Verona, a restaurant, a damn expensive one. Not exactly the kind of spot you take investor couples for spaghetti and pitch decks. No, this place had a dress code. It had a valet. It had romance. I stared at the transaction on the screen until the numbers blurred. $30,000. That was our oven, our dream flooring, our permits. Gone. For risotto and a bottle of Pinot Noir, probably poured across a candlelit table for two. Still, I didn't scream, didn't confront him. Instead, I put on a coat, got in my car, and I drove to Verona. It was 7:30 p.m., the golden hour for liars. I parked across the street, blending in with the glow of the city. My hands were shaking, but my heart was stone. I watched from the shadows, and then I saw him, my husband, wearing his navy blazer, the one I got him for our anniversary, and next to him, a woman, younger, long hair, red dress. She laughed like she didn't have to care who she hurt. They looked like a couple celebrating something, like they'd won something, like I didn't exist. He pulled out her chair, held her hand across the table, ordered for her. He'd never done that for me. I wanted to vomit, but I didn't. I took a picture, then another. I zoomed in and captured her face, his smile, the champagne flutes, evidence. He didn't see me. Too busy playing Prince Charming. And me, I sat in that car, swallowed the scream that was building in my throat, and made a decision. I would not scream. I would not beg. I would not be the crying wife. Instead, I would become the owner, not of his heart, not of his lies, but of the very restaurant he thought was his playground. Let him feed her tiramisu. Let him think he was safe. Because starting that night, I had a different kind of appetite. Not for food, not for revenge, but for control. And Verona, it would be mine, sooner than he could imagine. You learn a lot about a man when he thinks you're not watching. You learn even more when he thinks you're too soft to strike back. For weeks after that night at Verona, I became invisible. Not in the sad, defeated way, in the dangerous way. I watched him like I used to watch the dough rise in our tiny kitchen quietly, patiently, knowing it would eventually swell and crack. He still kissed me on the forehead every morning, still said, Love you. As he left with that leather briefcase I bought him 2 birthdays ago, Still came home and asked what was for dinner, as if his fork hadn't already fed someone else's lips. And I smiled. I made his damn dinner. I folded his shirts. I studied his lies like scripture. Because while he was feeding her desserts with the money we saved together, I was feeding something else a plan. It started small. I pulled the bank statements. I made copies. I traced every withdrawal, every lavish dinner, every boutique visit, every business trip that cost more than a mortgage, our savings, gone, 112, $784.57 to be exact, down to the penny. I stared at that number like it was a murder scene. Because, in a way, it was the death of our future, our promise, our restaurant choked out by his betrayal. I sat at our kitchen table in silence, the same table where we used to dream, and I let the betrayal settle in my bones, like cold. That night, he came home with a bottle of wine, red, from Napa, one we couldn't afford anymore. Thought we could celebrate, he said. I raised an eyebrow. For what he leaned against the counter, smiling like a man who thought he still had charm. New investor, big meeting went through. We're back on track. Babe, back on track. He had no idea he'd already derailed us. I nodded, lifted the glass he poured, and let the wine stain my tongue like regret. He toasted to us. I toasted to what used to be us. And in that clink of glasses, I made a vow I would not cry. I would calculate. The next day, I did something he never expected. I went to Verona, not to spy, to negotiate. I walked in during their quiet hour between the lunch rush and the dinner crowd. The maitre d' didn't recognize me, but the manager did. He came to my table, adjusting his tie nervously. Yes. Ma'am, can I help you? I'd like to speak to the owner, I said. His brow furrowed. She's not in at the moment. Would you like to leave a message? I smiled. No, I'd like to buy her out. He blinked. I'm sorry, you heard me. I want the restaurant, entirely. Kitchen, staff, name, wine cellar, all of it. He stammered. I think she'd want to discuss that herself. I placed a leather folder on the table. Inside a cash offer. Double the property value. Immediate close. No contingencies. I watched his eyes widen. I know you're struggling. I said, I know your lease is up in 6 months and your liquor license was flagged last quarter. I've done my homework. His jaw clenched. Still proud, still resisting. Look, I added, leaning forward, I don't want to change anything. I'll keep the name, the staff, even the damn dessert menu. He hesitated. But there's one condition. I said. He raised a brow. You tell no one, not even your servers, especially not your regulars. He nodded slowly, and then he shook my hand. 2 weeks later, I was the silent owner of Verona. He still had no idea. None. Every time he walked through those doors with his mistress, he was walking into my business, ordering off my menu, sipping wine from my cellar, paying bills that flowed right back into my account. Poetic, isn't it? They say revenge is best served cold, but I disagree. I think it's best served on a platter of irony, with a garnish of quiet dominance. Let him think he's still winning. Let him pay the tab while I collect. Then one afternoon, while reorganizing the files in my home office, I stumbled upon the notebook, our dream journal, the one we started together, menu sketches, logo ideas, even the floor plan we once drew on the back of a diner receipt. I flipped through each page like turning through a ghost. My handwriting was hopeful. His was bold, big loops, confident. We were going to call it Maison, a blend of our names, Madison and John. He'd even written, built by love, served with fire. What a joke. I closed the book and slid it into the drawer. Maison is dead, but Verona lives. And now it belonged to me. The name may be Italian, but the heart of it, it's vengeance, plated beautifully. He still hadn't noticed. Not when the staff started calling me Madame M behind closed doors. Not when the wine list suddenly featured my favorite vintage. Not even when the artwork changed, replaced by my own photography. He was too busy flirting across tables, too confident, too predictable. which made the next step deliciously simple. I sent an invitation. Elegant, gold-lettered, anonymous. Verona invites you to an exclusive private dinner for our most loyal guests. I made sure it came with a bottle of that same Napa Red. He opened it in our kitchen. I watched his face light up like he'd just been chosen by the gods. "We got invited," he said. Yeah, you and me, babe. Just like old times. Let's dress up, go out, reconnect." He had no idea what I was planning. I smiled. I said yes. And just like that, he RSVP'd to his own undoing. Some people scream, some people break things. I bought the floor beneath them and let them dance, not knowing it was mine. That night, their night was coming. But before the final curtain dropped, I wanted to enjoy every act of this performance. I wanted him to laugh, to flirt, to lean across the table and feed her forkfuls of overpriced pasta, before realizing I owned the silverware. The days leading up to the special event passed quietly. On the surface, nothing had changed. John still left home at 7:42 a.m., still kissed my cheek like muscle memory, still smelled like guilt and imported cologne. And I still played the role of the perfect wife. Only now I was also the boss. Every morning, I checked Verona's reports. Every night, I reviewed camera footage. He went there 3 times that week, always with her. Same table, same smile. Same delusion that he was getting away with it. She always wore red. How poetic. I watched them from my office laptop like one watches a stage play. Detached, calm. And I made notes, not on her lipstick, not on his hand placement, but on the menu. The wine they always ordered. The dessert she moaned over like it was something more than sugar and cream. I made sure it was on the menu that night. I was curating the last supper of their fantasy. The night arrived, Friday, 8 p.m. I dressed carefully, not in vengeance black, but in steel gray, fitted, understated, sharp. No necklace, just earrings. One ring my wedding band because irony is an art. I didn't take a car. I walked. Just 10 minutes from our apartment to Verona, but it felt like miles away from the woman I used to be. As I approached, the marquee outside glowed softly, Verona, an evening of devotion. I had to smirk. Devotion. To what lies lust legacy, let's call it what it was, a trap, with cloth napkins. Inside, the atmosphere was warm. Candlelight flickered. A jazz trio played something soft, mellow. Guests mingled over wine glasses, unaware that tonight's host was hidden among them. I stayed behind the curtain. I had instructed the staff to treat table 9 with extra care. The honeymoon table, they called it, tucked by the window, with a view of the street, the skyline, and betrayal in full bloom. They arrived at 8:05. She wore a red satin dress, predictable as ever. He wore the navy jacket again. I wondered if it still carried her perfume. Probably. They were seated, handed custom menus, poured their usual wine. They toasted, and I waited. At 8:37, they ordered the truffle ravioli, the wine pairings, and of course, the Verona kiss dessert. I had the chef prepare it himself, a show of respect. For me, I gave them everything they wanted, just not the ending they expected. At 8:49, I stepped out, not with drama, not with a spotlight, just with presence. I walked to the edge of the dining room, silent, confident, a shadow turning solid. A server spotted me first, eyes widening like he'd seen a ghost. He started to bow before catching himself. Then came the whispers. "She's here, Madam M. Owner." And then his eyes met mine. John looked up from his plate, a fork still halfway to her mouth. He froze. Recognition cracked across his face like ice breaking. At first, confusion, then shock, then fear. He opened his mouth, but I beat him to it. "Good evening," I said, loud enough for the room to hush. "Thank you all for joining us tonight. We're so honored to host our most loyal patrons." I let that sink in, turned to the couple at table 9, and smiled. I'd especially like to thank this table for their consistent contributions. Week after week, always generous, always faithful. Gasps rippled like heat through the room. The jazz trio stopped. Even the candles seemed to flicker harder. John looked like he might throw up. The mistress glanced at me, then at him, then at her dress, suddenly aware of its absurdity. I took 2 steps closer, held up a wine glass that a server rushed to place in my hand. To trust, I said, raising it. And to what happens when you treat your wife like she's stupid while dining in her restaurant. And with that, I toasted. John stood up. Madison, what the hell is this? I tilted my head. This, John, is dinner, the kind you paid for, with the money you stole, in a place that belongs to me. I took a sip. He stayed standing, sweating now, jaw clenched. The mistress started gathering her purse. You lied to me, she hissed at him, loud enough for nearby tables to hear. Sweetheart, I cut in. He lied to both of us. But only one of us has the deed. Laughter burst from a corner. Someone clapped. Another whispered, she's a legend. And in that moment, I wasn't just a wife. I was the woman who served karma with 3 courses and a custom wine pairing. I didn't yell, didn't throw anything, didn't cry. I simply walked over, placed a bill on their table, $0, of course, and a folded envelope with my initials, inside divorce papers, signed, dated, and a note. Bon appetit. You paid for the meal? Now you can choke on the consequences. As I turned to leave, the entire room watched. Some with pity, some with admiration, all with awe, because they saw something that night they didn't expect. Not just a woman scorned, but a woman who owned the floor beneath every betrayal. After the toast, after the silence, after the ashtray silence of a man burned by his own flame, John followed me out of Verona. I didn't stop, didn't turn, didn't slow my steps, even as I heard his voice behind me, low and desperate like a man chasing his last chance. Madison, wait. I walked faster. He caught up, breathless. The facade was gone. The man in the navy blazer wasn't charming anymore. He was cracking. Please, he said. I didn't know. I stopped walking. Turned. You didn't know I owned the place you've been cheating in. My voice was calm, too calm. He blinked, swallowed. Madison, it wasn't what you think. She doesn't mean anything. I let out a laugh, quiet, hollow. Then I guess we're even, because now neither do you. That night he didn't come home, and I didn't wait up. I sat in the kitchen alone, the lights off, the air still holding the scent of red wine and endings. I looked at the ring on my finger, then at the folder beside me. It held more than just divorce papers. It held my receipts, bank statements, photographs, screenshots, proof that I wasn't crazy, that I wasn't overreacting, that I had simply awakened. And the part that stung most, not the cheating, not the money, not even the lies. It was that he thought I would never find out, and worse, that if I did, I'd still stay. He underestimated me. The next morning, I went to Verona, not as Madame M, not as the owner, just as a woman who had something to finish. I gathered the staff. Some were nervous. They had seen what happened, but none spoke ill of me. If anything, they looked at me like I'd just walked out of a war with a crown. I'm making changes. I told them, we're rebranding, we're reclaiming. They waited. What should we call it, one asked. I smiled. Maison. Gasps. Whispers. The old dream was coming home. Not as a shared vision, but as mine. Within days, the signs came down. Verona faded. Maison rose. Soft gold lettering. New logo. New menu. Same address. I poured myself into it. Every recipe, every design, every decision. People came. Not just for the food, but for the story. They whispered about the woman who bought the place her husband used to cheat in. They pointed out the table, the infamous Table 9. They called it the Last Supper. Reservations tripled. Press started calling. I didn't answer. This wasn't about fame, it was about legacy. John sent flowers. A week after the event, a bouquet of white lilies and some pathetic card. You'll always be my girl. J. I didn't even open the envelope. I walked out back, tossed them into the kitchen fire pit, watched the petals curl into blackened silence. You brought her flowers. I whispered to no one. I brought the fire. He showed up one afternoon, uninvited, wearing shame like a second skin. I was in the dining room, reviewing seating arrangements. He stepped in like he still belonged. Can we talk? I didn't look up. There's nothing left to say. He moved closer. I messed up. Okay, but I love you. We can fix this. I turned to him then, and I made sure my voice didn't shake. Fix this, I gestured around. You see all this? The tables, the lights, the name on the window. This is me fixing it. Without you, he tried to play victim, said he was sorry, said the mistress meant nothing, said I'd changed, and in that moment, I realized something powerful. He was right. I had changed. I had become the kind of woman he never saw coming. Not because I got louder, but because I got sharper. He didn't leave with answers that day. He left with silence. My silence. Which was louder than any scream I could have thrown at him. Maison opened officially that weekend. Full house, wait list, champagne poured like liquid triumph. I gave a short speech. Every dish here has a story. Some sweet, some bitter. But every bite is a reminder that from ashes, something beautiful can rise. And sometimes, the table you get betrayed at can become the table you own. The crowd applauded. Some cried. I didn't. I just nodded once and walked back into the kitchen, where I belonged, where I built from scratch, where I burned what didn't serve me. They say the opposite of love isn't hate, it's indifference. And that's what I felt as I watched him pack his things. No rage, no tears. Just the quiet realization that I was no longer the woman waiting at the window. I had stopped waiting the moment I walked into Verona and signed the papers that changed everything. He begged, of course. Men like him always do when they realize the silence isn't just anger, it's freedom. He showed up at Maison once more, this time, with nothing left in his hands. No flowers, no apologies, just that same desperate look I used to carry when I thought he was the only future I had. Madison, he said, please, just one last conversation. I looked up from my table, my name engraved on the chair, my logo behind me, my staff bustling in the background, and I realized everything here had my name on it, not his, not ours, mine. I stood slowly, walked around the table, stopped in front of him. You had a chance, I said quietly, not just to love me, but to believe in me, to respect what we built, and instead, you fed it to someone else. He said nothing. What could he say? I stepped closer. Do you know the difference between you and me? John. He blinked. I built something from betrayal. You destroyed something from boredom. And with that, I turned. Left him standing in a room filled with people who knew, who had seen, and who would never forget. That night, after service ended, I sat alone at table 9, the same table they used to dine at, the same table I used to avoid. But tonight, it was dressed in white linen, candles, a glass of wine, and a notebook, the old dream journal. I opened it slowly. Page after page of what we once wanted, now just echoes on paper. But something told me not to throw it away, not to burn it like I did his letters. Instead, I flipped to the last page and wrote, "You thought you buried me, but I was a seed, and now I bloom with fire in my roots." I closed the book and smiled. Weeks passed, Maison flourished. We got written up in local magazines, then national ones, and one day I got a call. A young woman, quiet voice, said she'd been following my story. She was starting over, wanted to learn, asked if she could intern. I met her that Sunday. She reminded me of me, not the woman who got betrayed, the one who still had hope in her eyes. And I realized maybe this wasn't just about revenge. Maybe it was about legacy, turning the ashes of what they destroyed into bricks for someone else to stand on. I hosted a small dinner soon after, a private event, for women like her, like me, some divorced, some widowed, some just lost in the noise of someone else's success. We sat at a long table, shared food, shared stories, shared silence. And when one of them asked what I would tell my younger self, I said this: don't let anyone convince you that your silence is weakness. Because sometimes, silence is a sword sharper than screams. And when the time comes, you won't need to raise your voice. You'll own the room. John faded after that. I heard he moved, started over somewhere else, maybe tried to rebuild what he broke. But I didn't care. I didn't Google him, didn't ask mutual friends, because the truth is, I wasn't rebuilding my life. I was building a new one, from scratch. No blueprints, no shared names, just me, Madison, the woman who was left behind, and decided to buy the table they abandoned her at. And every night, when the lights dim, when the last guest leaves, when the wine is down to the final pour, I walk through Maison, touch the tables, breathe in the scent of roasted garlic and second chances. And I know I didn't just survive him. I outgrew him. I outlasted him. I outshone every lie he ever told. Not because I wanted revenge, but because I finally remembered who the hell I was, before he tried to forget me.